Hey everybody, I'm Sam from MCAT Basics. Today I'm joined by Alex Starks of MedSchoolCoach. He helped develop the MCAT Practice Exam from MedSchoolCoach. He's here to talk about it and talk about what makes it unique. So Alex, the first question I have for you is, there's a million practice tests out there. A lot of companies make them. What sets your guys' test apart from all the other ones?
That is a fantastic question. And I really feel that what sets our practice exams apart is the intense amount of background research and effort that went into designing what the plan was. And I'll elaborate on that. So we spent so much time studying the AAMC material, using it as our Bible, and really trying to emulate it without giving things away, right? So one thing that I feel makes our exams very different is we actually paid attention to the word and character count in the science sections. It's really easy to do that for cars, but in the science sections, we looked at exactly how many words, how much time students should be reading, and that goes from the passage to the questions to the answer choices. We controlled for all of that. And that I really feel that's something that is very, very unique about our exams.
So what was your role like in all of that? I mean, were you kind of doing everything? Were you writing discrete questions, passages? What'd that look like?
So most of my role was editing and touching up some of the work that our content team was making. I did write some of the passages for sure, but most of my role was making sure, kind of like the final eye, making sure it looked good.
And how does one write a passage? See, this is something I've always wondered. These science passages have so much information. They're so convoluted. Do you go and find a research article and then basically take the data from that article and then write a passage? What's that process look like?
Yes, I will say the process is a lot of fun. Yeah, that might be my nerdy part coming out, but it is a lot of fun, and it's really a lot of what you described. Of course, there are licenses that you have to pay attention to, so it needs to be something that you're allowed to edit and use for commercial purposes and whatnot. But after that, yeah, you find a topic that you find interesting and that a little bit about, and then you edit down the information, and you recreate the graphs. So you need to do that with how should I say, Adobe Illustrator or something, make it a little bit easier to read and whatnot, and then you write questions. I'm making it sound really, really simple, but it is essentially that process. Find research article, something that will help students with analyzing graphs and data and all that kind of thing, and then you write questions.
Now, is there something you do to make those passages sound like the AAMC? Because, when you're reading a passage, it doesn't read just like a research article. So, maybe what are some of the things that are different about a research article versus an AAMC passage? Does that make sense?
That totally makes sense. And probably the number one thing that is different, because there's tone and all of that kind of thing, and that's okay, but the number one difference between an actual research article that you would have to read for a class or something, right, and a AAMC passage that has the article in there, is they delete stuff out of the article that makes it make sense, and then they ask you a question about it. So that's the major difference, I think. So
interesting. Now, what about cars? Is cars made the same way? Those to me seem like they'd be extremely difficult to write. What do you think?
Yeah, they are hard to write. And a good car section emulates the sort of logic that the AAMC asks without giving things away, right? So anybody could go and write or get a passage and write questions that copy the AAMC. And then if you were a student, once you get to the AAMC material, you're like, oh man, I saw this on this third-party exam. That's not good. That's not what anybody wants. But for cars, really understanding the logic of the AAMC is super important. In terms of writing the passage, for our first exam, I actually wrote one passage from scratch because
Wow.
it was about jazz, and I know a lot about jazz, and so I wrote it from scratch, and it was hard. Like it really stretches you. But thankfully, there are hundreds of AAMC cars passages that you can really lean on and study so that you know what you're supposed to write there.
Interesting, interesting. What was the most fun part? Is that maybe one of the most fun parts, just being able to write about something you're interested in and write a passage about jazz?
That was a lot of fun because I wrote about my hero.
Oh, nice.
And yeah, so everybody who takes this exam will and sees this will know exactly what passage that was. I hope it's not too hard, but I really think the most fun for me is writing explanations because you're able to decode what the question is. You're able to like work in strategy, and we've done a ton of that in our explanations. So that's always the most fun for me.
Now let's talk about scoring. So first of all, how are these scored, and how do you make sure that the scoring is representative of an AAMC test? I could imagine that's probably a difficult part of this.
Yeah, I think this is probably the most difficult aspect of creating a representative and useful practice exam for students. So I guess I'll answer that question by starting off. Most third-party companies or non-AAMC companies, they will deflate the score. So, for ChemPhys, we'll take that as an example. 59 questions that you get. If for a lot of third-party exams, you get 30 questions correct, you're going to score a 126. Well, for AAMC, if you look at all the different scoring systems, you're going to need to get more like 42 questions correct or 40 questions or so to get that. And that's a huge discrepancy. That's like 10 questions. So what we decided to do, we had a lot of discussion about this, and I think it's the best way to go. We are not compromising on the scoring system. So what we have, if you get a score on our test, that's exactly what you would see on a AAMC test. And we've committed to continuously editing and improving our exam in order to be able to obtain that goal, that scoring goal. So I think that's one of the big things that separates our exams from other. So
Interesting. So to me, then it would almost seem like that would make it you would feel the same on test day taking the real AAMC test as you would taking a practice test like this, because if you miss 15 questions, you're going to get the same score no matter what. Is that kind of what you're going for?
yeah, absolutely, right? Because there of course, if you want a 129 in ChemPhys, again, just to use that as the example, I mean, you can write off 9 or 10 questions right off the bat. And so that plays a ton into strategy. And we want anybody that takes our exams to be able to use the exact same strategy as they'll use on test day. And that's one reason why we didn't deflate the score.
Awesome. So another thing that I was kind of excited about when looking over your guys' exams and your exam platform was just all the analytics that you offer to students who have taken the test. So I'm wondering if you could just talk a little bit about some of the metrics that you provide students after they take the test.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have the score report where all these analytics will be details, performance on all of the different topics, all of the different subjects. Like the score report will tell you what you need to go and study. You got 0% of the optics questions. You should probably go and study optics. So
we should all study optics.
Right,
It's
right,
like
exactly.
the hardest physics, in my opinion. Anyways.
I tend to agree. And so that's one thing that's really going to be helpful is that it will tell you what you should do next, because you can take a practice exam and you're like, okay, well, I'm gonna look through it, but what do I do after that? Our score report tells you exactly what to do after that. It's really cool. A lot of time went into it, and of course that came from a lot of feedback from my students over the years, and from our director Ken Tao, Mr. MCAT, like a lot of the feedback that he's gotten from his students, and that all went into this score report. The other thing that I think is super cool, and I don't think it's really out there, is a really easy way to look at the time spent per question. And it's a very, very easy way to look at where am I spending my time? Am I getting these questions right or wrong? And then it also tells you what you should probably do next, like to work on that strategy.
Yeah. Very good. Well, Alex, I appreciate your time. Thanks for joining me. Thanks for talking about your exam. If anybody is interested in taking the exam, you can go to go.medschoolcoach.com/practice.